This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Healthcare professionals can lead their careers with LinkedIn. Discover jobs by specialty, preferred shifts, and even desired salary. From mental health therapists to radiology technicians, it's now faster and easier for healthcare professionals to find the right fit. Learn more at linkedin.com/healthcare. Side effects may include faster job placement, improved work-life balance, and increased career satisfaction.
Tonight on NBC, Jimmy Fallon and Bozoma St. John host the highly anticipated new competition show.
I hired 10 creatives from all walks of life. They will be battling it out to see who can impress the world's biggest brands.
This is a huge opportunity.
This is the battle for the next big idea.
This is not play.
We're spending millions of dollars.
I'm so excited to embark on this adventure with all of you.
May the best idea win!
On Brand with Jimmy Fallon, series premiere tonight on NBC.
HR tech, work tech, and investment are transforming the future of work. Are you in the know? Welcome to the WorkTech Podcast. Join host George Larocque for expert insights on the trends, M&A activity, and strategies shaping the workplace. Brought to you by OneWorkTech.com and the Work Defined Podcast Network.
Hey, welcome everyone. It's me, George Larocque at WorkTech, and we're going to talk today about a topic that has been on everyone's mind, and I can't think of a better guest to help us with this conversation. If you were at last year's HR Tech, you saw them win an award in the Pitch Fest competition. The founder and CEO of FairNow Guru, Sethupathy, is here, and we're going to have a great chat about AI, ethics, bias, all the things AI. Guru, welcome.
George, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, and look forward to talking to your audience.
Well, let's start with a quick introduction for anyone that wasn't at the show last year and didn't get to meet you or learn about FairNow or hasn't done so since then. Tell us about yourself a little bit and about FairNow.
Yeah, happy to. FairNow is a technology company. We offer consulting plus technology to help organizations simplify AI governance, George. And it's a topic I'm very passionate about. Just going back a little bit about myself, I've been in the AI space for over 25 years. I have a background in computer science and economics, and so have kind of studied deeply this technology, AI technology, as well as the implications for work and jobs and society. And again, I'm very bullish. I think there's no putting this genie back in the bottle. I think AI is here, and I've been long bullish on AI. But at the same time, I think I appreciate the risks of it as well. And like any kind of powerful technology, oftentimes I'll talk about kind of the automobile as an analogy, right? Because people get it. Everyone uses cars. Everyone's been in a car. And everyone rides a car pretty seamlessly these days, but that wasn't the case 120, 30 years ago, right? And so I think we're in the first inning of AI very similarly, where there's a lot of trepidation, a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainty about this incredibly powerful technology. And the role that governance plays, right? The role, it's an unsexy term. Governance, right? It entails things like compliance and monitoring and documentation and all this stuff, which is not fun and can be tedious, which is why we want to help simplify and automate that for people. But at the same time, governance enables trust, and trust enables adoption. And that's where we want to get to, right? Responsible adoption enabled by trust, enabled by governance. And so, like I said, I've been in the AI space for quite some time. The last dozen years, I've been at companies like McKinsey and Capital One building AI technologies and AI solutions. At Capital One was leading all of that for the HR domain. And so I'm very familiar with the HR domain and kind of how enterprises think about it and how you can use AI to really improve the HR domain, right? The HR experience. But at the same time, these are incredibly, there's a lot of compliance in these domains, especially HR. There's a lot of kind of risk, right? These are regulated domains. And so you have to really have good governance in place in order to adopt this technology in the HR space. And so just the familiarity I have, I understood the pain points of governance in the HR space around AI. And what we wanted to do was go and build a technology and a company that can reduce that pain. And if we can reduce the pain of governance, what does that do? That reduces frictions between HR tech vendors and HR buyers. That increases responsible adoption, and people can then go work on the fun stuff. And so that's what we're here to help with.
Yeah. I think, when I met you last year, the thing that stood out was that experience, having done this for at scale, and when we talk about governance and especially compliance, people immediately look at one part of that, or in HR especially, we think about EEOC type compliance, but we're also talking about privacy, data security. There are many aspects of this, and you're really covering the gamut, right? Based on whatever the current regulatory environment is.
Yeah, look, AI has a couple of components, right? It has a data component to it and has a model component to it, right? And governance entails all of that, right? It entails everything from the data security and data privacy to kind of how do you use the models, how reliable are these models, how do you monitor these models, are these models biased, are they reliable, do they perform well, and then what are the outcomes coming out, right? So I think about it as inputs and outputs into a kind of a model, right? And they're going to get more and more complex, and we can delve into this later, but AI systems are not going to be a simple predictive model, which is what we've had for quite some time, or even NLP models, or even a straightforward chat interface LLM, right? It's going to get much more complicated. You're going to have agents that have multiple kind of data sources and model components kind of intertwined into a model system. And you're not going to necessarily know even all the different components right away. And you're going to have to, this is what I mean by governance, you're going to have to track this stuff. You're going to have to ensure you know what you're using here, because it's going to get more and more complicated. And so one of the things that we really, I think, pride ourselves in is understanding kind of the complexity of this technology and building a platform and architecture that allows you to capture the complexity of it so that you can ensure that you're governing all the pieces.
Yeah. As you were talking, it brought me back to thinking about my, in the last couple of weeks, OpenAI put its agent out, and, the world went crazy looking at that video that they put out. And I thought, wow, that's really cool as well. But my mind immediately goes to enterprise at scale. And I was thinking, if that's what an agent's going to mean, it actually taking over your computer. I can't think of a info security or IT leader who wasn't shaking with convulsions watching that, thinking about all of the risk involved. So I think agents and agentic AI in the enterprise, in our HR and WorkTech domain, will act and look a little differently than that, but it's really a great visual reflection of the access that an agent could have if it's untethered. And your solution is used by both or offered to both the tech providers in the space and the HR organizations that are implementing AI and maybe developing some of it themselves. Am I right on that?
Absolutely. And, we break it down into kind of the deployers side and the developer side. It's not a perfect split. People can build stuff internally as well. Yep. But you're right? So on the supply side, you have vendors and HR tech companies who are building AI into their systems and then selling it to buyers who are usually HR organizations. And we have customers on both sides, and we have customers on both sides because, one, they're both often in scope for these new regulations. Mm-hmm. And two, they're also in scope for existing regulations. And then on top of that, they both have motivations that go even beyond regulations, right? So on the vendor side, for instance, a lot of times, a lot of customers have come to us and said, hey, help us through the sales cycle, right? Like, we're getting a lot of questions, and we have hundreds of customers, and they're all asking questions, and we're getting different questions and bespoke questions, and help us figure this out. Help us simplify this sales cycle, this RFP, this process of governance around AI that we're starting to go into. And so one of the things, and we invite others, anyone who wants to participate, we're actually, one of the things we're hoping to do is create some standards around this in the HR space, right? What are the set of questions that a buyer should be asking a vendor? What are the set of documents they should be asking for and expecting? And what should the vendor, be willing to share? Right? Yep. And if we can standardize this, you can actually simplify the governance process, the governance around, and reduce the frictions around this kind of buying and selling of AI in the HR space. And we believe we have kind of the expertise and the technology to be able to help with that. And so that's why we have both sides of the market in as customers to really simplify and remove these frictions.
Yeah. thank you for going through all of that around FairNow. I think it really sets a great context for talking about what's happening in the market, because FairNow is unique. I don't bump into another product like this in the space. So that means you need to go fast, because if there isn't one, there will be. But so we touched a little on the regulatory environment, but I want to make sure we do that sort of landscape justice. Are there particular areas that are affecting vendors and organizations, or did we cover that, or are there some things you would really underscore in the current landscape?
Yeah, look, I'll say, in 2018, there was, I think, one law in the world related to AI. Mm-hmm. Now there is over 35 globally. Okay. And the biggest one of all is the EU AI Act, of course. Right. But the US has a few, right? The famous one was the New York City local law that came out in 2013. But since then, there's been 3 or 4 states that have passed laws, and several of those either are in effect or go into effect in 2026. And the biggest of those is the Colorado AI Act, which actually has some very common components to the EU AI Act. And then there are some very specific HR related. So Colorado one is general. There's some state specific ones that are HR specific, right? So Illinois, Maryland, New York City, for instance, are all kind of related to just HR. And then we expect this year, states like California, New York, not surprising, but even Texas has a law that's moving through its legislation. And so I actually expect in the US at least, less on the federal level, right, George, but much more at the state level, right? Many states and regions and locations passing AI-specific guidance and laws. California already passed some guidance on this. It's not a law, but they recommend that you monitor your systems and test for certain things. The other thing I want to call out is with these regulations, like even if there were no regulations, right? Let's just assume no regulations whatsoever, no one was intending to pass anything. I would still argue governance is such an important thing, because if you're a vendor, you still got to figure out a way to sell to your buyers who are worried about this technology. How are you going to do that? And whether that's a market standard or some kind of standard to demonstrate, hey, you can trust this, is important. Think about when you buy any kind of product that has a bit of risk behind it, right? Like, so the analogy I give is like with standard software, there was always some kind of product certification of like, hey, this technology is going to work. If it doesn't work, we'll remediate it in this way. What are the outcomes that could lead to it not working well, or it doing something with your data, or whatever that may be? It's that kind of product liability amplified on steroids when you have AI. Right? Because the potential, the benefits are higher, but the risks are higher as well. So even if there was no regulation, the market would still be skeptical and would have scrutiny, and you would need to find a way to reassure the market and build trust. And so I know we talk about regulations, the regulations people are worried about and concerned about, but my point always is go focus on your governance. How are you governing, and how are you demonstrating that this is trustworthy? And this is what we help companies with. We help them figure out what good governance looks like. We help them figure out how to demonstrate that to their clients and to build that trust. But that's really the key here, right? How do you do that governance?
Yeah, and I think.
And just as an example, just one thing I want to add there is some of these big laws like EU AI Act, Colorado, they even talk about that, right? They're saying, look, there's only so much we can legislate at this level because AI is so complex, it's nuanced. We can't get into all those specific details with these broad legislations. But they say if you implement good governance, and this is what good governance looks like, and if you implement good governance, we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Now, I'm not quoting them exactly correctly here, but essentially, we're not going to necessarily audit you, or we're not going to necessarily, we trust good governance as a process is going to buy you the benefit of the doubt, so to speak, because we know you have the right processes in place. And so governance is really the key here.
Yeah, I think as I look back over the last few decades and just being in and around this HR space, the regulatory environment's always changing. There are new regulations or modifications. Every customer, every employer has their own governance, has their own take on, for some it may be their own security policies and procedures. For others it might be around more compliance from a EEOC type compliance perspective, certain benchmarks that they set. But by having a defined understanding as to what bar everybody's meeting, there's a starting point where they can basically check all of those boxes off and move to a more substantial conversation. So especially in this kind of environment, I think it's important to be able to standardize so that, because it's hard enough to get your head around AI and make this, it's going to be difficult enough if you have that done for you, that's a great place to start. Speaking of this environment, you alluded to it, the current administration in the U.S., from a federal perspective, I know the things that the order that was in place was rolled back. We don't know what will be coming to replace it, if anything. Is that impacting this part of the market at all right now?
Not really, because we really didn't have much federal guidance to begin with. There was the executive order, right? But the executive orders, as they tend to be, are very kind of broad and just kind of lay out some broad principles, but they're not binding in any way, shape, or form. Now, what maybe is getting rolled back is the executive order had gave some specific orders to agencies, federal agencies. The OMB, for instance, had started to roll out requirements for how federal agencies should deal with the AI that they're procuring, buying, whatever. That got rolled back, stuff like that. Now, they may still want to do that anyways, because again, like I said, governance is a good practice, right? Like this is not a bad thing that you should be doing. You should be making sure that the AI software you're buying is reliable and trustworthy. So you should probably do that anyways. But I think at the state level, nothing's going to change. If anything, they're probably going to move faster at the states because they know they're not getting anything from the federal government. So the states are going to move faster. You're going to get more. If anything, this is, I think, going to make this a more complex regulatory environment, right? You're going to have more states, more cities, more regions passing their AI laws because they're not going to get any guidance from the federal government. And then, of course, you're going to have globally a lot of stuff, right? Like South Korea, Brazil, just passed some things. Euro AI Act, UK and Canada are expected to pass, right? So you're just going to have, if you're a multinational company, you're going to have a patchwork and complex regulatory framework to deal with. And then on top of that, though, again, I go back to you need good governance anyway. So it's not going to change the fact that your customers are asking you questions. Your customers are like, hey, George, how does this technology work? What data are you using? How do you deal with data privacy? Is there bias? You're going to get those questions anyways. So you're going to have to figure out a way to answer those questions.
Right. So that leads to, I think, the question around, sort of we've laid out the regulatory environment. So what about approaching this from a best practice sort of use case perspective? What do you have any guidance, based on what you've seen so far? It's a little bit like the Wild West out there right now. And how do you advise folks to navigate these AI waters, if you will?
Exactly. Look, I'll share a slide or two if you have
that's great.
Share stuff with your audience. You can attach this on for them. There's two things I talk about. One is kind of how do you go after AI? What does a good AI agenda look like? And then we'll talk about governance as well. So if you're looking to investigate AI, right, I break it down into 4 buckets. What is your AI strategy, right? Start with business use cases. Where do you find business opportunity to improve efficiency, efficacy, experiences, any of those things, right? Don't start with the AI. The AI is a tool. Start with your business case. Start with your use cases, right? That then will govern your AI strategy. Which of those business cases are really, going to be impacted by AI? That's when it starts to meld together, and you can develop your AI use cases. Okay, so that's point 1. Point 2 is in order to then execute your AI strategy now, you need 3 things. 1 is data and technology. Do you have the right data to be able to use this technology? And then how are you building the technology? Are you building it internally? Are you getting it from vendors? How is that going? All that kind of stuff. Then there's something around change management, right? Do you have the talent internally? And then also the way AI is going to work is it's going to change your workflow, right? And so how do you redesign your workflow? How do you complement humans with the AI? How do they work together? Right? Humans are still going to be in the loop. They're still going to play an important role. But what does the new workflow look like? If you take recruiting, for instance, there's a certain workflow that recruiting happens, right?
Yep.
From sourcing to the selection process to the interview process to hiring all the way, onboarding all the way through all of that stuff. There's a workflow. How do you redesign that workflow? How do you make it better using AI? So that's the second piece of the thing. And then the last one is governance. And so that's what I want to talk about here. So what does good governance look like when it comes to AI? The first thing, first and foremost, is know what AI you have in your organization. George, I can't tell you how many companies I've talked to, and one of the first questions I ask is, hey, how many AI applications do you have? And no one ever gets it right. And that's governance 101. How do you manage risk of something you don't even know how much you have of, right?
Yeah.
So inventory your AI applications, know what the risk levels are. If a lot of them may be low risk, and you don't actually have to do a whole lot. But you have to know that, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to document that and know that, right? So the first thing we recommend is inventory your applications, understand what risks you have. The second thing I often say is humans in the loop. What role humans have to play an important part in governance. We, through our platform, one of the value props of our platform is we automate a lot of governance, but humans still have to play a critical role. And so what role are your stakeholders playing? What review process do you have internally? What policies do you have internally? What training have you done internally on all these things, right? All of that becomes important. Your policies, your procedures, and your humans in the loop.
Yep.
Third piece is testing and monitoring. Are you testing this stuff? Are you ensuring that there's no bias? Are you ensuring that the performance that you expect, if it's a vendor product, are you ensuring that the performance that they claimed is actually what you're getting? Are you testing this out? Right?
Yep.
If there's bias, you're on the hook as a buyer, not the vendor, right? Like you are deploying this thing. So you've
Right.
got to make sure that you have tested this thing, right? So testing it, data privacy, bias, reliability, performance, what is your mechanism for testing? And then of course, regulatory compliance, right? Making sure you're compliant with whatever laws are in scope. So these are best practices. And then what we do with some of our customers, we go a little bit deeper. Like what are some of the policies that you need to have? What is a good, roles and responsibilities and accountability framework? What does it look like? What's the cadence you should be running your testing on? So, there's a whole nother level and layer that we can go into. But
Yep.
at a high level, it's those components that comprise good governance.
Well, and that we've talked about how this goes through privacy, security, compliance, all of that. But you really summed it up. The stakes here, the vendor is providing the technology, but the employer is on the hook for
Yep.
that compliance. It's not deferred back. If
That's why it's your responsibility to ask the vendor tough questions before you go buy their product. And that's why the vendor, if they want to make that sale, should be ready to answer some tough questions. Now, there are certain questions, like if it's secret sauce type stuff, like they don't have to answer. But you don't need to get into that level of the detail. There's other questions that you should be asking them. And we have a document where we share, hey, these are the questions you should be asking. And again, that's another thing I can share with you if that would be helpful for your company.
Yeah, I'll share all of that. That's really helpful. I think it goes both ways, though. I think there's, it's not about prescribing to a level of governance. It's your governance. It's, if certain aspects of compliance are more important to you than others, or you interpret bias in certain ways, that's your call to make. But you need to know what you're dealing with, to know that the culture you're building, that the tools you're implementing support that. And that's, I could go on and on, but
I love that point. I love that point, right? Because all we can do is give you a skeletal framework for thinking about governance, and we can tell you some best practices and what good looks like, but you got to fill in the details. I can't tell you what your kind of policies around the red lines of using AI are. That's up to you. That's up to your company culture. Who are you guys? When will you not use AI? When you have to debate that internally and let your culture define that for you. Or your risk tolerance. What is your risk tolerance? I don't know that. Some companies are more risk averse, others are more risk taking. So you're going to have a variety of differences across companies around how risk tolerant they are around the use of AI, right? So this goes on and on and on. And so only I can again tell you need to come up with this policy, but you have to internally come up with and define that.
Yeah. The other point that you made around an understanding of how many AI applications are in play. I can cite who shared this stat, very credible.
Okay.
NASDAQ shared this stat.
Okay.
And it came from a great sample size, great research study. But they asked both the CHROs and then the HR professionals and organizations. They said, are you using AI within HR? And over 80% of the CHROs said yes, we are using AI, and that's probably accurate, because I think given that they write the check and they have some perspective of what they've bought. We've had AI for a long time. The newer generative AI and conversational interfaces, that's something that is very new. But on the HR front, only something like 28% in those same organizations said that they were using HR. So the CHRO, 80% said we haven't, 28%.
Can you send me that? I think that's a perfect distillation of the challenges that we have here, right?
Yeah, and I think it's just, when you're using, the interfaces are changing, but it's been a SaaS world for so long. When you put your search string in or you click on your workflow, you're not really you're thinking about the result you're getting back. You're not thinking about an algorithm or what's happening really as a user. So it's not to pick on that 28%, but it is.
Well, I think part of it, and again, this is something we help organizations with, right, is there's two challenges here, which is why you have that discrepancy. One is the definition of AI. Not everyone has the same definition, George. Like what you're thinking 100%. About AI might be a little different than how I'm thinking about it versus a third person. And so that's one of the things we clarify for folks is, hey, this is the definition of AI. It's any system that takes data as an input and then makes inferences on that data in order to do things. It could be in order to make predictions, in order to do recommendations, in order to generate content, in order to perform tasks, whatever. But the key thing is that it takes data as an input in order to make inferences, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the kind of the key system. And so you're right, AI has been around a while. It's been around for decades. And even in business, it's been around for decades. And even in HR, it's been around for over a decade, right? So I would say, machine learning models and NLP that have been around for a while in the HR ecosystem, that's all AI. And now it's just much more sophisticated. It's getting better. It's more complex. But there's already AI in a lot of HR organizations.
Yeah. I earlier today, it was going back on a separate topic in the talent acquisition space, and realized that it was almost 11 years ago. I did this presentation about AI and HR and talent acquisition, and looking at the topics, it was a totally different type of AI and type of experience, but it was really very much the same conversation that we're having today. Right. It's just that the tech has evolved so rapidly, and the experience. Well, I could talk about this all day. I know we're close to time. I want to ask you to share, where can folks? We'll share all the slides and documents that you mentioned, but where can folks catch up on FairNow and learn more about these topics and what you're doing?
Yeah, like I said, I'll share some documents with you, and hopefully that will be helpful for your audience. And just to kind of recap again, what we do at FairNow is both a combination of consulting, but then the technology platform. And we really kind of hold your hand through this process of AI governance. We understand that companies are in the early stages of this. This is new to them. And so we hold your hand, we help you develop a governance program, and then implement that on our platform. And what's nice about the platform is it simplifies it for you. It's a centralized place to store kind of all your AI governance related information, and where all stakeholders in your organization can come together, not having to deal with 5-10 different systems. 2, it's intelligent, so it gives you recommendations and insights about laws, what laws are in scope, what you need to do, what steps you need to take. It gives you all of that kind of information and insights to you. And 3, it automates a bunch of stuff. It automates kind of document review and documentation and a lot of things that are just kind of tedious, right? And so that's where customers really find value. And look, if you want to learn more, come talk to me. My email is guru@fairnow.ai. You can also come to www.fairnow.ai and learn more and come to our contact page there. But hope to help more organizations out as we, and I think this year is going to be a big year going into 2025, 2026, and AI governance is going to be a big deal.
Yeah, there's so much happening right now. I think you're right. And Guru, thank you so much for your time coming to share your story and talk about these topics with WorkTech and our audience. I really appreciate it.
George, thanks for the great conversation, and hopefully this is helpful for folks. And I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to be talking about AI governance. So.
Yeah, and thanks to wherever you're watching or listening, or YouTube or the Work Defined Podcast Network. Thanks, and until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the WorkTech Podcast. Visit us at oneworktech.com and find out why WorkTech is considered the most trusted source of market intelligence and strategic advice for WorkTech. Subscribe to the WorkTech YouTube channel for video episodes and exclusive content. And be sure to check out the entire Work Defined podcast network at WRKDefined.com for more podcasts on the world of work.